hello, everyone. It is Keturah Kendrick, author of No Thanks, Black, Female, and Living in the Martyr-Free Zone. And I have with me, who are you?
Hi, I'm Tonya Freeman from New Orleans.
Tonya is the lucky winner of a free copy of No Thanks. Yay, look, we're both flashing it. Wave that book. Woo! One of my first tour stops after I had my launch in Shanghai was in New Orleans, the beautiful, my hometown. Although I have not lived there in a long time, I will always call it home. If I hear anybody talking smack about New Orleans, I'm taking my earrings off. So,
all right.
I'm just being real. My hometown, and Tonya was one of the participants who expressed interest in being a part of the giveaway and sent in her name and got a free copy of the book, even came to the reading at Community Book Center and was very candid in sharing some personal experiences. So now that Tonya has read some of No Thanks, because when you were at the reading, Tonya, you hadn't read the book yet. You had come to pick up your free copy. But now that you have read it, can you just tell me what your thoughts are? Is there a certain part of it you're responding to? Is it something that you feel we can relate to? Or just initial, have the English teacher and me come out. What do you think? Your initial thoughts of the book?
Well, initially I didn't have any thoughts. I was more curious than anything. The title piqued my interest, and Martyr-Free, being a Black woman, being, female Black woman living in the Martyr-Free Zone, what was that? And as I began to read the first few chapters of the book, I began to get an understanding about the author, you, and where your head was and what inspired you and motivated you to write the book. I couldn't relate to it because I was one of the women who wanted to have children. And I think I really didn't know why I wanted to have a child. I wanted to have a child because that was something that women supposed to do. And I didn't have a why to have a child. So as I began to read the book, I began to question my why. I began to question myself. What's the reason behind having children? Is it because you don't want to be alone? Is it because you want to have someone that looks like you in the world? Is it because, when I get older, I need to have someone to take care of me? And none of that is promised. And I've only found out that it's not promised to you because life happens. And in 2019, I don't have any children. So I get to, and it was by choice, because I could have, but I chose not to on a couple of occasions without having going into that. However, when I read the book, I saw a sense of a part of myself that I did not give credence to, of that woman who didn't want to have children, the woman who was empowered without children, with or without. And I didn't give credence to the woman who didn't want to deal with diapers, didn't want to deal with a husband or a baby daddy with drama and all those things. I've always been told growing up or as a young adult in my 20s, chase your career, have children later. And I never understood that because I was the type of person that would always dive into relationships and always wanted that husband and always wanted to have kids. Well, I got the husband and and I got the career, but no children, and realized after my husband died in 2001 that may not even be a possibility for me. And it's been 18 years since he passed, and I have never remarried. I'm rethinking all of it. And I also thought I wanted to have kids, but at this stage in my life, and after reading the book, I can find joy, I can find satisfaction in being single and not having children, and not being selfish about it. And that was one of the things in the book about the S word, because other people thought you were selfish about making a choice for your body. And also the part in the book where it says, you know, I could lose my life even going through the process of birthing.
Mm-hmm.
And those who may have come up, approached you and said, well, don't you want your ancestors to come through your children and this and that and the other? And don't you want to make Oshun happy? And
the Oshun one, just like, what Oshun got to do with my womb? Like, I got to think about Oshun, my mama, Jesus, like, and none of these people possess this womb.
Exactly, you know, and the perspective you came from was it was powerful. And it also brought light to the myths and the traditions that we repeat, and we don't give any thought to consciously creating, period.
And if I can interrupt you, Tonya, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because one of the things I posted in my social media, because at these readings, I'm always asked, what's the message? What do you want us to do after we read the book? And I always jokingly say, live your damn life, because I know what was my truth. My truth was I was indifferent and disinterested in marriage. I knew I was not going to have a baby ever. I wanted to travel the world. I didn't believe in Jesus because that was a part of my truth, my owning, saying no thanks to Christianity and it's not after God. But I didn't want any woman to read this book to think I was trying to sell them on my life. If you truly, because there are some women who are childless by circumstance, like they yearn to be mothers, and for a number of reasons they can't be. I didn't want anyone to feel that they should question that, but I'm glad that you organically said, I didn't have that in my life. And when I read this book, I started to really sort of examine why did I want it in the first place. And I think that to me makes me very happy that I didn't sort of browbeat child free, travel the world, be atheist. I didn't browbeat that, but you just started thinking about that more, because you're right. A lot of people across this world don't ever stop and say, first, do I want all of this accoutrement of womanhood? And if so, why? Just that. You're right.
Yeah, when you're a kid, you don't know why. A lot of times pregnancies are unplanned. Nobody planned. All they want is what comes before the pregnancy. The pregnancy is just the end result, but most people don't really understand the aspects of creation from the womb perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we get ourselves in trouble because we have no frame of reference in choices, because a lot of us make choices by default. We make choices in choosing men that we think we love, but we know nothing about them and their backgrounds.
I love that phrasing. We make choices by default. That should be on a t-shirt.
So if you don't do it, I'm gonna do it.
Exactly. One of us has to make that happen. Choices by default. You're right. So many of us do exactly that, and we have to get away from that. So any final thoughts, any specific questions for me about the book, about the process, anything that you want to ask me or share with me in our final little chit chat?
Now, in terms of the Christianity part, I grew up as a Christian, and a lot of the tenets of Christianity I thought I knew, but I didn't know. So what made you move away from that?
I think I began questioning this idea of a supernatural being who had dominion over my life at some point in my late teens. And what I realized as I became older is that while I had the trauma, I think, that happens in the way Western Christianity is practiced, because a lot of traditional conservative Christianity really is controlling women, particularly women's sexuality. I think it has nothing to do with theology. And the more I learn from especially progressive Christians and progressive theologians, it has nothing to do with scripture. It's just patriarchy is a grounding foundation for many societies, and Christianity and religion can't escape that sometimes. So I've come to the point where I've been able to unpack that and not blame what I felt was misogyny and sexism on the church itself, on the teachings of Christ. But what I do know is that here's what I will say at this point. I don't believe there's a supernatural being called God. And if you don't believe in that being, you can't really call yourself a Christian. If you don't believe that his son, Jesus Christ, was any different from Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, any person who fights for the disenfranchised, you don't believe that he will give you safe salvation, then you're not a Christian. And I think I'm at a point now where I'm willing to admit I could be wrong. God could in fact exist, but in the cool gray light of morning, as my grandmother would say, my loyalties lie with human beings, not supernatural ones. So I'm a humanist. And while I don't necessarily know if there is a God, I don't believe there is a supernatural being called God. But at the end of the day, I'm on the side of the humans, and I will always side with human beings before I do with supernatural ones.
Wow. So that's been your experience. Yes. As it through life from 18 or from a teenager, right? Moving forward and in your experience.
Yeah, I stopped going to church somewhere in high school, and I just claimed atheism for a long time. Mm-hmm. In my early 30s, I discovered Nichiren and Daishonin's Buddhism, and it has been a spiritual practice that has felt right for me, that has helped give my life some purpose and some mission. And in the simplest form, Nichiren Buddhism is a form of secular humanism. So we don't necessarily believe in God. We work together, and our mission is to bring world peace and to support humans in their humanity. And that just seems right to me, more so than worshiping of a deity figure or being a member of a Christian church.
I can agree with that. Not agree, but I can relate to it. Because when I left New Orleans and moved to Maryland, that was, Chicago and then to Maryland, that became a playground to understand and to learn more about spirituality. And there was so much spirituality. And of course, I had to get out of New Orleans to see New Orleans in a different light. There's so much occultism and so much spirituality in New Orleans already. It's just spirit. And I'm more embracing that than the actual figure of Jesus, whether, he was a prophet, whether whatever, just the whole dogma. I just started to reevaluate the embedded theology that I had been fed most of my life. And I had to actually unlearn a lot of the things that I learned or question what I learned. So in that quest, moving forward into enlightenment,
yes,
I can embrace some of the things that I've learned from Christianity, which was my foundation, and the things that I've collected and learned along the way that has opened my mind and opened my eye, my third eye, the truth, right? To see the truth, how energy works and how that is expressed. We were given the energy. We came with a certain ashe or energy, and we get to express that by our choice. And those are the things that I'm embracing, and I still have work to do to unlearn a lot of the things that I've learned, which a lot of it in your book is about the embedded thought processes and the false beliefs we adopted from our families. And it doesn't mean that we go against our families. However, it just makes us more confident and aware that, okay, you've served your purpose for this up to this point. Now it's up to me to discover and self-discover and self-actualize and realize who I am. And those are the things that were stripped from us and taken from us, and we didn't know because we've been asleep for so long. Yes. So this book is an awakening for me. I get to read it, go more into it in depth, and hopefully come back after I've read it once or twice and highlight it and wrote things in the margin and all that other stuff.
Well, Tonya, thank you. I love how Why can't all of my English students be like you? Why can't my students be like you? Talking about you're gonna go back and read the book 2 or 3 times. I tell them to read the book more than once, they get mad at me. You're gonna highlight, underline. That's how you read a damn book.
You got it right. Which, okay, how did that feel? Like, okay, I gotta put my glasses on real quick. So this
text to text. What?
I'm sorry.
No, you were gonna say something. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I wrote in my margin, whoa, WHOA apostrophe exclamation point, whoa.
Whoa. What did you write whoa to? I'm curious. What did you write whoa to?
So, well, it's a bunch, but this one. Another ploy to correct the selfishness of child-free women is to insinuate that birthing and raising children venerates deities and memorializes ancestors. Don't you want to honor Oshun? If you want to get your grandparents back, bring children into the world. They continue to fight for forefathers. They continue to fight our forefathers could not. Our selfishness, it also dishonors the supernatural and steals the legacy of the dead. I'm like, what?
That's pretty much what they're saying. Like, you thinking about yourself, and it's all these other entities that you're supposed to be thinking about. Oshun, your ancestors, your mama, you the only child, so now your mama ain't gonna have no grandbabies. The phantom husband, there could be a husband in your near or distant future. So think about him. You even got one. Mm-hmm. God forbid you have one and you have told the husband, I won't be having kids, and he still want to marry you, and you still.
So I read, whoa, and reading it once is good. You skim over it, but when you really read twice and 3 times, which I don't think I've ever read a book 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Because I read, when even in the first reading, I'll reread certain things over and over and over and over again. But I know if I took a second look or third look, I'll see something totally different.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I just wanted you to have the book because I wanted somebody to read it, and I'm glad you came out to the reading, and I've gotten so much good feedback. But I got to tell you, I have truly enjoyed this conversation, and not only because you were seeming to really get into the book and digging into it the way I hoped readers would, but you had so many insightful things to say, and again, you are truly digging into the text. So thank you again for this conversation. I'm glad you are enjoying it. And yes, please do read it 2 or 3 times. Let's both hold our book up. Yay! No thanks. Get it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for shining your light and sharing your story and your perspective. It's a very powerful perspective, and it gives me, and I'm hopefully sure that it will give other women pause to think about the cause and the why we do things, and be more intentional and not become martyrs because other people have done it before us. You're interrupting patterns.
Yes, and that's all we need to say. Thank you, audience. Get the book, read it like Tonya.
Bye.
Bye.